She was already laughing when I stepped back from the bathroom hallway. Not a small chuckle either. It was one of those half-tipsy, polished laughs people do when they're trying to impress someone. It rang out just as I passed behind the fake greenery between the bar and the private dining room. I didn't even mean to stop. I didn't plan to listen. But the words she said next. Emery, he's sweet, but he's like a decorative pillow. Nice to have. Not essential. Definitely the biggest mistake I ever committed to. I froze, one foot still halfway behind the ficus. Another voice chimed in, a woman, I think. You're awful, she giggled. Then Mallory, my wife, doubled down. No, I mean it. I love him, but in the way you love a blanket from childhood. Familiar, a little sad, and totally useless in adulthood. They laughed, clinked glasses. I didn't move, didn't blink. My fingers were clenched so tight around my phone I could feel the edge of the case digging into my skin. She had no idea I was standing 10 feet away. No idea I'd followed her after she said she was going to the powder room, even though I just watched her whisper to that smug coworker in the dark red tie, the one who kept putting his hand on the small of her back during dinner. No idea I'd already opened the ride-sharing app and canceled our scheduled car home. But now I knew I wasn't her partner. I was her accessory. Her embarrassing tattoo from college she never quite managed to laser off. She smiled when she returned to our table, slid into her chair like a swan, touched my hand with those perfectly manicured fingers. Sorry, she whispered. Line was ridiculous. I looked at her. I really looked, and I thought, you've mistaken quiet for weakness. You've mistaken loyalty for lack of options. You have no idea what's coming. I didn't argue. I didn't flinch. I nodded, lifted my glass, and said, let's enjoy the rest of the night. And we did, for exactly 58 minutes. Because an hour later, Mallory's entire world tilted. Her smile, the practiced one she uses at events and on camera, cracked so hard I could hear it even above the jazz trio, and all I had to do was let someone else open the envelope. I didn't touch my food after that moment. Not the overpriced sea bass she ordered for me, not the stale rolls sitting by my wine glass, and definitely not the signature dessert she swore I'd love. I just sat there, the same way someone watches a storm roll in through their windshield, motionless, quiet, already soaked on the inside. Mallory chatted like nothing had happened. She didn't know what I heard. She didn't know the version of me at that table had just shifted ever so slightly. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even sadness. It was vacancy. Like I had been evicted from my own body and someone else was wearing my skin. Across the table, I could still hear bits of the conversation between her colleagues. I picked up names I'd never heard before. Fancy consulting firms, finance terms that meant nothing to me, and a particularly annoying guy named Spencer who kept referring to everyone as legends. The whole thing felt surreal, like I'd been dropped into someone else's dinner. She kept reaching over and brushing my hand like we were still that couple who sent each other random memes during Zoom meetings. But that moment behind the ficus hadn't just changed how I felt about her. It rewired everything. She hadn't slipped up in a moment of anger. She didn't scream at me in a fight. No, she laughed. She dismissed me with charm, with confidence, as if humiliating me was just the part of her social routine. And the worst part? I was still sitting there like an idiot, like a child too afraid to leave the table without permission. So I made a decision. I excused myself and said I needed to call our pet sitter. Mallory didn't even blink, just smiled and said, "Tell Luna I miss her." The cat, not me. The cat. I walked out the side entrance and crossed the street to the tiny print shop that I had spotted on our way in. I'd remembered the sign said, "Open late for business clients." The guy behind the counter looked tired, maybe a college kid on his third shift of the day. I asked him for an envelope and a single sheet of paper. What I wrote wasn't cruel, it wasn't dramatic, but it was very, very clear. When I handed it back to him, I told him to walk into the restaurant exactly an hour from now, ask for Mallory, and hand her the envelope in front of everyone at her table. He raised an eyebrow but agreed. I paid him $50. He smiled. "You just saved me from folding flyers all night." Then I walked down the block, got in a rideshare, and left. She still doesn't know where I went. Not yet. But I promise you, she will never forget what I wrote. And what was in that envelope? It was simple, but it shattered everything. The car ride was quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the type that hums with everything unsaid. I didn't go home. I didn't even have a plan. I just needed to be away from that building, from her perfume, from the way she laughed while undoing years of loyalty with a single sentence. I ended up in the parking lot of a 24-hour grocery store. I sat there under the flickering light, watching strangers carry bags of frozen meals and six-packs. People who probably weren't having their marriages dissected over cocktails. I kept checking the time on my phone. The minute hand inched forward like it knew what was coming. At exactly 9:06 p.m., the envelope was supposed to be delivered. I imagined her reaction 100 different ways. Maybe she'd play it cool, slip it into her clutch and open it later. Maybe she'd fake a laugh and say, "Oh, Emery, so dramatic." Or maybe, just maybe, her smile would crack. Her voice would hitch. That elegant composure she wore like armor would finally fail her. Back inside that dimly lit steakhouse, the guy from the print shop, Trevor. Yes, he told me his name while pocketing my 50. Apparently walked in right on time. He followed my instructions straight to her table and asked in the most polite, cheerful voice possible, "Excuse me, is there a Mallory Ridgewell?" She must have smiled. She always smiles when strangers say her name. "This is for you," he said, handing over the white envelope with her name handwritten on the front. "From your husband." What I had written inside was only 4 lines long. It said, "You looked beautiful tonight." Almost made me forget what I heard behind the ficus. But not quite. The ride home has been canceled. So has the version of me that tolerated this. I didn't curse. I didn't threaten. I didn't accuse. I just told the truth. What followed was exactly what I had hoped for. Mallory opened it right at the table. According to what Trevor later texted me, yes, he followed up, curious. She turned white before she even read past the second line. Her fingers started shaking. Someone asked if she was okay. She didn't answer. She just grabbed her purse, stood up too fast, knocked over a half-full wine glass, and walked out without saying goodbye to anyone. No big exit, no dramatic speech. Just silence. Her most unfamiliar state. And me? I was still in that parking lot, watching nothing, feeling everything. But something inside me had shifted. Not healed, not yet, but shifted. The man who sat alone at that dinner table wasn't coming back. I wish I could say I felt triumphant, like I had flipped the script, reclaimed something, turned the tables. But the truth is far messier. After Trevor sent that last text, she dipped fast. Looked like she'd seen a ghost. I just sat in my car staring out at the blinking grocery sign, feeling nothing but hollow. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't relieved. I was just untethered. My phone buzzed the first time at 9:28 p.m. Mallory lit up the screen in all caps. I didn't answer. I watched it ring out. 3 minutes later, it buzzed again and again. 6 missed calls within 25 minutes. 1 voicemail. I didn't want to listen to it, but my thumb hovered over the play button like it had a will of its own. Her voice cracked from the beginning. "Emery, baby, I don't know what you think you heard, but it's not what it sounded like. Please, just call me. Please." She sniffled like she'd been crying, but part of me wondered if it was just for show. Mallory could sum in tears the way others flipped light switches. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. "You can't just walk away like this. You have no idea what kind of pressure I'm under at that office. Sometimes I say things just to survive. I didn't mean it. Okay, just to survive." So, I was a casualty of her survival tactics, a human shield for her ambition. She didn't call again after the 6th attempt, probably realized I was ignoring her on purpose, probably furious now that her carefully crafted narrative, the doting power couple, was unraveling. I drove across town to my brother's apartment. He was out of town, so I let myself in with the spare key he always forgot I had. I sat on his worn couch in the dark and stared at the ceiling for hours. Didn't eat, didn't sleep. Just replayed her voice in my head. A decorative pillow. A mistake. Soft. Around midnight, I finally opened our shared cloud drive, the one we used to sync grocery lists and vacation plans. I deleted my access. Then I backed up everything I wanted from our shared album. The photos from Colorado, the ones with Luna in the window, all of it. And I renamed the folder before logging out for the woman who doesn't need me. It was petty, I know that. But sometimes pettiness is the only language that hurts as sharply as what you heard. I didn't know what I was going to do the next day, but I knew what I wasn't going to do. I wasn't going to go back. By the time the sun started rising over the city skyline, casting a dull orange glow through my brother's dusty apartment blinds, I had made up my mind. No calls, no confrontation, no tear arguments in the kitchen or long explanations that could be twisted later. I would speak to her in a language she understood. Optics, image, control. If she saw herself unraveling from the outside, maybe, just maybe, she'd feel what I felt sitting behind that plant. Around 6:40 a.m., now I ordered a rideshare to our house. Not to see her, just to retrieve what was mine. The driver asked if I was okay when I got in. I said yes, even though I hadn't slept. My clothes were wrinkled, and I probably smelled like defeat, but I didn't care. My goal was simple. Get in, get out, leave the message. I unlocked the front door quietly. Mallory wasn't home yet. That didn't surprise me. She probably checked into a hotel or maybe went to a friend's place to regroup. Or maybe she was still driving around rehearsing a version of the truth she thought I'd believe. I grabbed my laptop, my backup hard drive, a few clothes, my old backpack, and Luna's favorite toy mouse. Not the cat, just the mouse. I left the cat. I'm not that cruel. Then I walked into the bedroom. It was still perfectly made, as if untouched by real life. Mallory's side of the dresser looked like a curated Instagram post. Jewelry arranged just right. Perfumes in height order. A single lipstick angled diagonally like some luxury ad. And in the middle of it, I left a white card. No envelope, just the card. And on it 5 words written in black ink. You're free. So am I. Then I walked into the kitchen, pulled open the drawer where we kept the spare keys, and placed mine next to hers. That silence, that unnerving morning stillness, It wasn't peaceful. It was surgical, like the final breath before something is officially declared over. I didn't slam the door when I left. I didn't linger. I just walked out. An hour later, when she finally got home, she called me again. But this time I didn't let it ring out. I picked up and I didn't say a word. She started talking fast, her voice shaking, trying to explain, trying to backpedal. But after nearly 2 minutes of her frantic monologue, I finally spoke. Just one sentence. I heard everything, Mallory, and I left you the truth. Then I hung up for good. Mallory didn't go quiet. Not for long. That's not in her nature. She's the kind of person who doesn't accept silence unless it's scripted in a press release. When she realized I wasn't coming back, her instincts didn't tell her to reflect or apologize. They told her to take control of the narrative. Within 24 hours, I began getting messages from mutual friends, confused ones. Apparently, she'd started painting the story differently. She told me you stormed out because you were feeling insecure again. One friend messaged. She said you had another episode and didn't want to embarrass yourself in front of her coworkers. Another wrote, she's worried about you. Said, you misinterpreted something, she said jokingly. Misinterpreted? She'd called me her biggest mistake. I didn't need to decode that. It was crystal clear. And yet, it worked. Some people believed her. I could feel it in their tone. The same people who used to ask how I was doing, who used to laugh at my awkward jokes at dinner parties, were now texting me like I was unstable, like I was the fragile husband who broke down under pressure. I should have expected it. Mallory was a PR executive. Spinning situations was her sport. So, I did the only thing I could. I didn't engage. I didn't defend myself. But I did send one thing out into the world, not to hurt her, but to end the rewriting of my story. I posted a short message on my personal blog, the one I hadn't updated in months. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't name names. It simply read, sometimes you hear the truth when you're not meant to. And when you do, it's not your job to fix the liar. It's your job to walk away. I'm okay. Not broken, just awake. I didn't expect anyone to read it, but people did. A lot of them. Quietly. Silently. Some reshared it, some messaged me privately. Not with pity, but with their own stories. Stories of overheard betrayals, of masks slipping in boardrooms and bedrooms. It was strangely comforting, like I wasn't as alone as I thought. But Mallory saw it too, and that's when she stopped calling. She didn't reply, didn't refute, because for the first time the truth wasn't just whispered behind a ficus. It was out there, and it had a pulse. I should have known Mallory wouldn't let the silence last. For someone who curated her life like a brand, unanswered questions were a threat, especially when they were being whispered at her office in hushed conversations over coffee machines and Slack messages she wasn't tagged in. My blog post had done something she never expected. It tilted the spotlight toward her, and not in the way she could control. So, it didn't surprise me when I received a carefully worded email from her that read more like a PR damage control memo than a letter to someone she once called her husband. Hi, Emery. It began as if we were two professionals who'd met once at a networking event. She said she'd reflected deeply, that she regretted the tone and context of the comments overheard, and that she hoped we could discuss a path forward that minimized personal and public harm. It was cold, calculated. Not a single line about love. Not one sentence that sounded like her voice when we were lying on the couch 3 years ago, sharing takeout and whispering about what kind of dog we might adopt. No vulnerability, just cleanup. She ended the email with, I'd like to meet in person, preferably somewhere private, to talk through the optics of how this unfolded. I believe with the right language we can both come out of this gracefully. The optics. The language. It wasn't about healing. It was about her narrative, about spinning this so she didn't have to be the villain, so she could tuck it into a chapter called Misunderstandings and Miscommunication and move on. I didn't reply right away. I waited 3 days, not because I was unsure, but because I wanted my response to come from a place of clarity, not reaction. When I finally answered, it was with one sentence. There's nothing left to reframe Mallory. Just what's left to remember. I didn't meet her. I didn't follow up. And maybe for the first time in my life, I didn't care who believed who, because the truth had finally stopped being a secret. But just when I thought the story was closing, something unexpected happened. And it didn't come from her. It came from someone at her company. Someone who knew exactly what happened that night, and had proof. The message arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, tucked between spam promotions and a billing reminder. It was from a woman named Jenna, someone I barely remembered, an HR assistant at Mallory's firm. We'd met once at a holiday party. She always seemed quiet, maybe a little overlooked, the kind of person who blends into corporate wallpaper. But apparently Jenna had been near that corner booth the night of the company dinner, and she'd heard everything. More than that, she'd recorded it. Not maliciously, she explained, but as part of a documentation protocol. Apparently, she was already compiling evidence for an internal harassment case against a senior partner. Her phone had been recording nearby conversations for timestamps and context. Mallory's words, "My biggest mistake, I settled soft," were crystal clear in the background. Jenna said she debated for weeks whether to send it to me, but when she saw Mallory's attempt to rewrite the story publicly, she knew it wasn't fair. She attached the clip. She didn't ask for anything in return. She just said, "You deserve the truth without spin." I didn't share it. I didn't post it. I didn't need to. Just knowing someone else heard what I did, that it wasn't in my head, that I wasn't fragile or overreacting, gave me the one thing I hadn't felt in months. Peace. That night, I went back to my brother's place, sat by the window with Luna curled in my lap, and wrote the final post for my blog. Healing doesn't come with apologies. It comes with truth, and when you find it, you don't go back for the version they wish you'd accept. You move forward with the version that sets you free. A month later, I signed a lease on a small place by the water. Nothing fancy, just quiet and mine. I started freelancing again, built a little rhythm of work, walks, coffee, and soft music. Sometimes it still stings. Memory has a cruel way of rewinding. But the weight is gone. So is the fear. I didn't just leave the marriage. I left the version of myself who begged for validation from someone who'd already decided I was a placeholder. And in doing that, I found something better than closure. I found myself.